Alfred Ngaro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise and take a call on the children, young persons and their families. Oranga Tamariki legislation bill in its first reading. I just want to comment that the previous member, Jacinda Ardern, who spoke, and I would agree, as she said, that for all of us here in the House, we have the same intent and purpose, which is to ensure that our children, our tamariki and our whānau are well cared for, and especially those who are more vulnerable. In fact, I can remember being in a debate, and the member talked about poverty, and I can remember being at a debate, I think it might have been in 2014, and where we talked about the challenges of poverty on our children, and the member's right. I mean, the reality is that poverty and the issues and the challenge of it have been around for some time. In fact, the comment that the member made at that point in time was that actually for them, under Labor, over those previous 9 years, it was a job unfinished. And what that goes to prove the point is that the challenges are very complex. They cannot be solved even in a short period of time. They are systemic. They need a critical point of change constantly along that process. So the member's right, and in that debate when she talked about her comments, were that actually, when questioned about in the 9 years under a Labor government, why hadn't it reduced child poverty? The response was that it was a job unfinished. It was a job unfinished. And I agree with the member, because it is complex, it is difficult. So I agree with the member that this is something that we need to be consistent about. So the process in order to be able to deal with these things, and if we think about this bill, actually sits inside a range of other issues that need to be addressed. The issues around housing, issues around employment, all of them, health, education. And when we talk about that, they are systemic of the challenges that we face and that our children face. So I would agree with the member. If we then narrow down to where this bill sits, and I can remember, Mr. Speaker, that back in the day, and in fact in 1995, I actually began a period of time where for about 6 or 7 years, I was in the Resource Care and Protection Panel out in Royal Oak. I can remember at that time, part of our roles of responsibility was to be able to, as social workers came in, as they talked about the challenges that they faced in their case management approach, they then would get feedback from us as community representatives to talk about those challenges and how they were accommodating for the complexities of what they were facing. They were talking about kin carers, they were talking about placements, statutory roles and responsibility that they had to remove children out of a traumatic situation. And even then at that time, I would have to say, when I read the stories that currently are and the casework of social workers at present, nothing's changed. I would say that nothing's changed. Those issues are still present. So I have to commend the Minister, because after 14 reviews, this is the second part of a transformation of overhauling this part of the bill. And so I think that's important. So the things that I think that are significant about this, and we think about the significant change, is that the focus of the current Act of 89, Children, Young Persons and Their Families Act, became more focused on crisis management, where the point of difference for this bill is to ensure that actually they're looking at a number of long-term life outcomes for children in care. And I suppose it's more outcome focused rather than actually the immediate aspect of ensuring that the care and protection, the well-being of the child. So what we would call as more crisis management, moving into a more outcome focused, is quite critical to that. The second part I think that's quite critical is that we've always talked about the point of difference, which is being child-centred, and we know that's being quite fundamental. So it's a part of that is the paramountcy of the child. But then when we think about, for instance, when we think about the whānau order model, which introduced by our coalition partner with the Māori Party, is that the fact is they're talking about the paramountcy of the whānau, the two collectively working in together. And so while we try to hold those two elements together, what I think is significant about this, and looking forward to this then and hearing the submissions through the Select Committee, is then how do we allow the voice and the concerns of our children to also be part of the planning of a safety plan, but also to an outcome-focused plan into the future as well. And so I think actually this is going to be quite critically important to that as well. It allows us to have a single point of accountability, and it has a social investment approach. In other words, when we think about the procurement of services that surround the child, if we think about in education, for instance, it's a similar process where the funding will follow the child. And so therefore, what's quite specific about this previously is that in a sense, the funding is there to provide, for the providers to provide the service. What we've seen is that model has to change. The model now has to be focused at, so here's the child or the children, the tamariki in this situation, so what's going to best serve their needs and their issues that they currently are experiencing. So therefore, this is where there is a point of difference that I think actually is quite critical. And so the whole procurement model of services is going to be quite critically important to this process as well. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that I'm looking forward to this bill coming into our select committee. We're actually meeting tomorrow. We'll also then be able to open up for submissions to hear from others. And I'm sure that, as the member has said, Jacinda Ardern, that we'll be able to debate robustly the issues. There are always opportunities to shift and change and remodel legislation as it sits. I mean, that's part of the grunt work of a select committee. So I look forward to that opportunity, and I do commend this bill in its first reading to the House. Thank you.